Another Peter Parker Field Trip by MessiniaAdoria. Chapter 2. So then Mr. Stark called me over to come take a look at the betting book, which I was totally fine with because it was starting to get really awkward after the fourth person came up to poke me in the shoulder just to make sure I was real, they said. Peter poked Ned in the shoulder as a demonstration, although the boy practically doubled over, he was laughing so hard, so he probably didn't feel it. "What were the bets?" MJ asked as she leaned against the wall at the front of their school. "Who did they think you were?" She was having trouble maintaining her usual stoic display, if the way her lips quirked up at the corner was anything to go by. Oh my gosh, they were crazy. Peter threw up his hands in exasperation, glancing around quickly to make sure none of the other members of their physics class had wandered within hearing distance. His classmates were still milling around the school's courtyard as they waited for the bus that would take them to Stark Tower, but none of the little groups had drifted their way. This was the first chance he'd had to tell his friends about the lab rounds he and Mr. Stark had begun making each time Peter had gone to the tower over the past week, and their discovery that not only was Peter known by many of the employees, he was also fairly infamous among them. Apparently, his sporadic errands for the genius, as well as his weekend wanderings around the tower, had not gone unnoticed or unremarked upon. Even though Peter rarely interacted with anyone directly when he was downstairs, he was too curious for his own good and would frequently look around. Stark Industries was the leading tech corporation in the world. Who could blame him? Occasionally, when something really interesting caught his eye, he'd even make comments or suggestions on projects by leaving the employees' notes. Even if he himself was often overlooked, his solutions on those scribbled notes definitely were not. Friday had also inflamed speculation when she refused to answer any questions about him, due to some privacy protocol Mr. Stark had put in place to protect his heroic alter ego's identity. However, Mr. Stark said that would have only stopped her from identifying him as Spider-Man, and not as Peter Parker. Mr. Stark said she was just being a troll. He was very proud. "Come on, ma'am, what were the guesses?" Ned was practically vibrating from suspense. "Well, there was everything from me being a Hydra spy, which, why would I be trying to help them then? To a CIA plant? Hello, I'm 16. There was also a ridiculously number of people who thought I was a ghost. Seriously, these people are supposed to be scientists. But the most popular one," Peter paused for dramatic effect, "was that I was a cryptid." Even MJ was audibly chuckling now. "Apparently there's even a lab on floor 46 that had started leaving out snacks as some sort of offering after I corrected an equation they left up one weekend." Peter shook his head, still in disbelief that he had become some kind of SI urban legend. He didn't tell his friends that the second most common bet was that he was Mr. Stark's secret illegitimate son, although his mentor's reaction to that one, a whispered, "Close, just missing the biology," made him all warm and fuzzy each time he thought about it over the past week. "Were the snacks at least good?" Ned asked through tears, bringing Peter back to the conversation. "I don't know," Peter pouted. "Mr. Stark wouldn't let me go check, but he did say we could visit that lab tonight after the field trip is done." "So, who actually won?" MJ asked, her facade of boredom firmly back in place. "I have no idea," Peter said with a laugh of his own. "They were still arguing about who was the closest when Friday sent us a message from Miss Potts that dinner had arrived." Just then, the bus they were taking on their field trip pulled to a stop in front of the school, effectively ending their conversation. As the rest of the students started gathering in front of the bus, the trio picked up their bags and joined the line. Ms. Warren stood at the door to the bus, marking each student as they stepped on board and verifying that they had turned in their signed permission slip packets. When Peter was in front of her, she asked him to step aside for a moment so they could have a word before he boarded. "Yes, ma'am." Peter quickly moved over so Ned could get checked in. Even though Tony took a couple more minutes for the rest of the line to pass through, his anxiety was spiking. Why would she need to speak to only him? "Follow me." She turned as the last student disappeared onto the bus and strode far enough away that their conversation couldn't be overheard, at least from anyone who didn't have super hearing. Luckily, Peter was the only one of his classmates with that ability, at least as far as he knew. Before he could start stressing over the possibility of hidden superpowers of anyone else in his class, his teacher turned to him. Ms. Warren stared at him for a few moments with a stern look before speaking. "I've heard the rumours." "No, don't say anything. I want you to listen, not feed me excuses right now." She stared at him again until Peter closed his mouth and nodded before she continued. "I've heard the rumours about your supposed internship at Stark Industries, and I want to make myself explicitly clear. I will not tolerate any disruption or attention-seeking behaviour from you on this trip." Peter stared back at her in shock as she kept talking. He knew most of his classmates thought he was a liar, but the teachers too. Was it all the teachers, or just Miss Warren? Did the administration believe him? If not, what did they do with all the paperwork and the progress reports Tony had been sending in? Tony was going to be pissed. He hated doing paperwork. It was that thought that made him interrupt his teacher. "But I've turned in the paperwork." "If you interrupt me one more time, Mr. Parker, you will not be joining us on this trip." Ms. Warren cut him off, her face starting to flush. "As I was saying, regardless of any dubious paperwork you have filed or assertions about how you should be believed, I do not want to hear another peep about it. Not one more word about any internship or who you know or anything that you might use to draw attention to yourself while we are visiting SI. We are a very prestigious school, Mr. Parker, and I will not have you besmirching our reputation. If I hear one whisper of anything purporting to connect you to Stark Industries today, there will be serious repercussions. Your guardian will be called to collect you immediately, and you will be suspended. Have I made myself perfectly clear?" She finished with a huff. "Yes, ma'am," Peter said through gritted teeth. But then, unable to help himself, he added, "My aunt is working today, and she can't carry her cell phone on shift in the hospital, though." Ms. Warren flipped a few pages on her clipboard. "Then it's a good thing I have the contact information for 2 other people on your emergency forms," she said with finality. "However, if you think you'll be unable to refrain from drawing attention to yourself, I can send you back inside now." "No, ma'am," Peter told the teacher with a forced innocent smile. He knew exactly who those other 2 contact numbers were for, even if the teacher didn't make a connection to the initials TS and PP on his forms. When his teacher released him with a wave at the bus, he quickly turned and climbed aboard. Thankfully, Ned had saved him a seat, but when he asked him what Miss Warren had wanted, Peter just shook his head and pulled out his phone. He quickly opened the group message with Ned and MJ and explained what happened via text. The trio spent the drive to Stark Tower typing away, silently venting to each other and expressing their indignation over the situation. By the time the bus pulled to a stop in front of the familiar tower, Peter was feeling vindicated by his friend's outrage on his behalf, as well as incredibly grateful to have such unwavering support. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this chapter, and thanks again to Poppy Evans who suggested this fic. If you have any suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Have a lovely rest of your day.